humanity is moving forward, and I think it's important now more than ever, when you see all the wars going across the world and everything, that we learn to come together as a species, right? As the human race on Earth.
Hey there, beautiful souls. It's your girl, AlliE, and I'm super stoked to bring this to you today because we have a very special UAP Society family conversation in store for you right now. So let me just get straight into it. Justin, say hey.
How's it going, everybody? It's your favorite host, Justin. Always glad to be here.
And this is George, your second most favorite host. It's George with a G, aka the legend of Honolulu himself. Very excited to be here. We've got a great guest, as AlliE said, and back to you, AlliE and Justin.
All right, so for our audience who is unfamiliar with this man up here in the corner, let me introduce you to Alexei Novitzky, who is a lifetime practitioner of meditation. He has been learning in his dreams since he was 5 years old, and he has a bachelor's in Astrophysics/physics and Planetary Sciences from CU, and in addition to that, and a master's in mechanical engineering from USF. His work has been on display at the Smithsonian's Ripley Center, Air and Space, and Museum of American History. He has also traveled and given lectures on innovation and creativity to middle schools, high schools, colleges, universities, and libraries. Lucius, say what's up.
How you guys doing today? Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's so good to be back hanging out with you again, man.
Yep, I think it's been about a year since we last hung out,
Yeah, definitely. So let's just kick it off at that point right there. So back in way back in 2022, it actually was May 27th, 2022 is when the UAP Society launched a balloon into space with a payload, a camera. We had stickers, we had a USB thing in there, we had a whole bunch of stuff, and the idea was to get this balloon to space, collect some data, collect some footage, and then bring the information back to the society. And Lucius just happened to be one of those guys that had to trek through the mountains and find this thing and bring it back to us, right? Why don't you tell us that story?
Oh, well, in short, we launched from Vernal, Utah, and it ended up in Dinosaur National Monument, which is in Colorado, but in the middle of the mountains, nothing around. And so we drove as far as we could, and then we hiked for a bit until we ran across some ATV action. And we asked the people if they would take us on a ride. This is a very short version, and they did, and we were able to recover the payload.
Nice.
Yeah.
That was a cool event. That was definitely a cool event. It was something that was well covered. There was a lot of people involved. We coordinated the whole thing with Sky360, so that was a cool collab. I was just really gracious to be a part of that project, and I feel like it's cool that was the starting point of our friendship, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then after that, we also did that CE5 event together.
Yeah, yeah, July 2nd, 22.
Yeah, we wrote dates down. We came prepared.
Yeah.
So yeah, back in July of 2022, we all met up and we did a CE5 out in the woods. We had my girl
on Looshes' property.
On Looshes' property, right? We had my dog Gretchen there, who has since passed. I miss her so much. Love you, Kirsty. But yeah, it was a cool situation. We live streamed it on YouTube, so we brought in a live audience, and it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I believe we ended up seeing a couple lights in the sky moving, through the sky, and we didn't really know what they were. They could have been airplanes, but it seemed a little mysterious at the time, and it correlated right in the time frame that we were doing the CE5. So
yep,
I don't know, it was cool.
Right on. Yeah.
Lucius, Let me ask you real quick. Where does the name Lucius come from?
Oh, good question. I wanted to ask that.
I stole it.
It's
Oh,
actually
you did.
it's like a nickname for Alexei. Is the easiest way to put it. So a nickname for Alexei would be Alyosha or Looshes, and that becomes Americanized by my lazy soccer teammates in high school to Lucius. And it gets stuck, you know.
So it's just something that's stuck. It's like a childhood kind of nickname.
Yep. Pretty
Okay,
much.
cool. And
Awesome.
for our audience, those of you that don't know, he has a website, luciuslabs.com, where you can find, some of his productions. You could see his skate case. I don't know if you want to talk about your skate case. I think that's pretty cool. You can find all of his books on there. You could see the kind of work that he's done. So definitely check out luciuslabs.com. And if you want to find him on YouTube, it's at The Skate Case. So do you want to talk about the skate case? Tell people what that is? I don't know if you want to mention it or not.
Well, I could. I could also go grab one real quick if you guys want me to. It'll take 30 seconds to pick it up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it. And for the audience out there listening, we will be posting and pasting links in the description. Feel free to subscribe to his YouTube, like his content, give us a thumbs up because it helps us out with that algorithm action.
Absolutely. Click like, click subscribe, click the little bell, make sure it does the little ding-a-ling thing so you get all of our notifications and share with all your family and friends.
I figured I'd bring two different models.
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, we're giving the floor to you, man.
Well, so when I displayed at the Air and Space Museum, I decided to do an ode to Neil Armstrong, and so I handmade an original longboard for that one.
Sick. That's like a Sector 9, isn't it?
This is a Lucius Lab skate case, the 40-inch Arrow.
Wow.
Amazing.
Wow.
And so what makes them unique is that they're the only boards in the world that this is one of the originals, so it's a little primitive, but you can open them.
Oh, look at the inside with the aliens. Yes.
Yeah, that's so cool.
It has depth, right? So you can put, for example, you can get your mind, body, spirit book.
Oh,
put it
snap.
inside the
Plug it.
right?
Very nice.
Yeah, very cool.
So that was when I was hand making them, but then over the years I've raised capital for injection molding.
Okay.
And so now I have the injected molded version. These are like rubber grips I pour in house. This is an electric model.
Whoa.
And I also turned the skate case into a cartoon character named AlliE the Skate Case, and he goes on adventures with me. And so this is his board game where you start on Earth. It's like Chutes and Ladders, but it has wormholes and black holes. And you go from island to island and end up on the moon.
I loved that game as a kid. I cannot tell you how many hours of my life I spent sliding down those chutes and climbing up those ladders.
Wow, look how deep it is.
So this one's a little bit different, right? It has all the electronic components inside because this is an electric skateboard.
Oh, nice. Okay, I got you. Yeah.
So it's basically...
That's incredible.
It is, right? It's basically like a skateboard, but you could keep stuff in there. So it's got its own like little stash pocket.
Yeah, but that one's electric.
Yeah, so I also make the non-electric model too for kids. And inside that one, I put the coloring. So I also have a coloring book.
Okay. Which is for sale on his website, luciuslabs.com.
There you go.
So this is the coloring book, and that's AlliE. So that's my skateboard in cartoon form. And if you were to even search AlliE the Skate Case on YouTube, it would actually be on my mom's YouTube channel.
Oh,
I did that a long time ago. You'll see like little animated versions of my skateboard and I walking around in cartoon form. The first episode is actually we help an alien get back to his home planet.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. I like how you integrate your hands-on technical know-how with electronics and the science of riding on a skateboard and developing your own designs, the compartments, even the art idea. And I guess the question I have for you in relation to that, because when you've showed us those two samples of your board, it appears that you've integrated your acumen and knowledge with respect to astronomy and also the lore to some degree of ufology. And I've been following your content for a while, and I'd like to ask you, based off of the content that you typically put out, a lot of it has to deal with physics, science, metaphysics, consciousness, psychology, parapsychology, right? So you have this long-standing history of exploring somewhat complex and esoteric aspects of the human condition, right? Including the role of thoughts and thinking and theoretical frameworks that involve quantum mechanics to some degree. I want to ask you, with respect to your education and your hobbies and how you integrate your understanding of science, right? I was wondering how you typically strike a balance between acknowledging, say, the harsh realities of existence, right? And maintaining your hopeful and positive outlook on life as an entrepreneur, as a human being, as a scientist.
Well, that's a big question there.
He's good at those.
Yeah.
I think there's always ups and downs. And so to say I would always be positive and would be wouldn't be so right. So every now and then we all do have our struggles and whatnot. But I think humanity is moving forward, and I think it's important now more than ever, when you see all the wars going across the world and everything, that we learn to come together as a species, right? As the human race on Earth, rather than identifying yourself as I am this, and so I need to act like that, or I have this much money, so I act like that, or I'm this race and I act like that.
Yeah.
I like to call those delusions, because ultimately they're man-made concepts that we've identified ourselves as, and all of those little aspects somewhat remove us from being our true self, is the way I like to think of it. A human is naturally loving and caring, in my opinion. It's doubts, you could say, or abstractions that get pushed onto you that now shift you from being your perfect self.
That's quite something to reflect on. And when you mention this aspect or this idea of the true self, Brother Looshes, I was wondering, because human beings are such complex creatures, we have the ability to think rationally. We have the ability to engage in certain types of thought experiments that produce things with the use of science to, forward humanity, to foster culture. But, I wanted to ask you about dark side, the shadow self from a Jungian perspective. How might acknowledging and embracing this shadow aspect of ourself, or one's dark side, contribute to maybe a more deeper understanding on how we exist in this 3D dimension, and its impact on human perception, not only in this plane, but as well as the fifth dimension, which you're often known to kind of cite in a lot of your videos.
Yeah, I think that if you could consider that shadow self more of the subconscious things that are going on with our body that we're not typically aware of, I think the more you become aware of your subconscious thoughts, the more you can correct yourself in a way. Because I know that we've all been raised in different cultures, and we've all been taught those, like we were just saying a second ago, all those different thought processes that we're born into. The more you meditate, the more you become aware of. So a lot of retrospect, right? So analyze the day and see what, try to figure out what caused a certain pacing motion within your life at a certain moment. Where did that first stem from? Did you have a bad experience when you were 10? Did you have one when you were 15? Those things we hold on to, but we don't even really recognize that we're doing that. And so then over time, that's what I like to call clusters of conscious co-creation, because ultimately when you're suffering from one of those thought processes that you're holding on to, you essentially create friction between different cultures, and they create boundaries, sort of like mental barriers. Like, I can't connect to this person because subconsciously I was traumatized by that type of person when I was 10. So it makes it hard for me to do that, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to that oneness aspect of all of humanity, I think that being aware of those pacing motions is important. But when it translates into the fifth dimension, you call that the dimension of conscious density. And what does that mean, really? Well, all of our pacing motions start from the subconscious, the collective subconscious of humanity. is ultimately what creates the pacing motions of our lives. And then when we're awake within this world, we do our best to try to navigate it, but that's already been started through that subconscious layer. And how does that translate into the denser realms? Because you could say the subconscious would be the bigger realms. Our dimension is more inward. And then you could say there's a dimension even more inward that relates more to concepts such as like the jinn, the demon, and tulpas and things of that nature. And so when you really hold a pinpointed focus of delusion or of a doubt or of a harmful spiral, you'll start to create habitats for these beings to exist within. And so it's all very interconnected. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And it makes me want to bring up CE5 because I think on one of your videos you said something about that when we practice CE5 we're connecting with seventh harmonic entities. Can you speak on that?
I don't know if I've ever used that term before.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so the question I believe should be, when we're doing CE5, do you believe that we are connecting with a seventh harmonic entity? In your time atom chapters of the book, you speak about human consciousness existing within a sixth. We have six harmonics, right? And then if there's a being that is another dimensional or another harmonic that is an interdimensional being.
I get exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I messed up the question. So my bad.
That's okay. That's okay.
No, it's all good. So yeah,
I wrote the question out earlier.
Just to break that down a little bit more, you could say that each one of the conscious harmonics we have in our brain is a different dimensional layer. So delta through fast gamma is 6 harmonics of experience for the human body.
Yeah.
But what happens when we have an out-of-body experience or near-death experience? We hit that fast gamma, which somewhat indicates that we're doubling the vibration, right? So between delta and theta is 2 times. So 2.5 hertz is a delta wave. You multiply that by 2, you're in theta. Multiply by 2, you're in alpha, then beta, slow gamma, fast gamma. Well, when people hit that fast gamma, they're already interacting with, you could say, the DMT elves or angels.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
So that, it's hard to, I think that's our biggest clue physically that we have as far as our physical dimension, is that when we hit that certain harmonic of experience, we have interactions with beings from different dimensions. And potentially the 10 hertz wave for the human, the alpha wave, is only that for our dimension. And so we go delta to fast gamma relative to our dimensional layer, but they could also be delta through fast gamma within their dimensional layer. But when you think about time dilations, that would end up being the 160 hertz wave or 320 hertz wave relative to our perception of the universe. Is that making sense?
Oh, yeah. Good answer.
Okay.
Well, it makes sense to me. I don't know.
George, what are your thoughts?
So,
I'm a nerd.
I like how you mention alpha brainwave state, theta brainwave state, fast gamma, beta, right? And I'd like to ask you about the hard problem of science when it comes to consciousness and how scientists across different fields and discipline, they wonder, hey, is there a way to measure consciousness or, the way that we perceive things or discern things, not just on a collective level, but individually as well. But I want to pose the question to you with respect to the scientific method and how it comes to play with Looshes' personal beliefs, specifically in the realm of faith, confidence, and belief when it comes to shaping your reality. Yeah, if you can extrapolate that for the rest of us, what would be the implications of this potential research that you're actively reflecting on in your daily content be?
I would say a couple different things real quick. So scientifically, a way to analyze this is to think of the superposition of relative vibrations. And so you could say we live in this just big ocean of vibration. And now we have a human body that exists within a very specific dimensional layer. And all the harmony that we're experiencing within our physical realm is tuned to our alphas and beta states. We really only experience the physical world when we're in alpha, beta, maybe slow gamma. Delta and theta, we're in a dreamland. Fast gamma, we're in out-of-body experience. So when it comes to brain harmony in relationship to our physical dimension, it's alpha, beta, and slow gamma. Now, if you want to think about tools in order to actually perceive these outer dimensions and inner dimensions, you need to think about the superposition of relative vibrations. But when it comes to consciousness, you could say that we live within a vortex of infinity, and that right now we're just experiencing a dimensional layer. So every little Planck voxel is the center of a vortex. Ultimately, we live in a great black hole. And so how could you consciously perceive a denser dimension or a less dense dimension? Well, you need to, so understanding that every single little point can be seen as the center of a black hole, it means your delta wave has a very specific orbital. Your theta state has an orbital, and they all exist within a state of tidal locking. And so each one has its own size. And so if you were to actually, so let's just say delta is this big, fast gamma is this big. If you get space that's this big and expand it to the size of your delta, now you've actually shifted through a different dimensional layer. It's almost like Tom DeLonge says, where there's the layering of different dimensions, but those are all in states of rotation, and they all have different sizes.
And frequencies, right?
And the frequency is based off of the size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the delta wave is the biggest wave of our experience. And when you think of the raw spirit of creation drifting inwards along that Fibonacci sequence, that's the first brain wave that actually interacts with the future or of our creation is your delta wave. The second one is your theta wave. And how does that translate into a scientific understanding? Well, that's the subconscious mind. So then we perceive it with the alpha and beta next. Then you have slow and fast gamma. And so you could, in a way, you could say that the outer realms are the past. You could say that the inner realms are the future, or you could call them a denser realm and a less dense realm. But it relates 100% with our perception of time as well.
Interesting. And I'd like to follow that up. You speak of this interdimensionality aspect and these scalar aspects from the very small to the very large. You know, in terms of the concept of dimensional energies, right? Being tidally locked within, you know, this vortex of infinity. You say we exist in a black hole. How can this inspire people on an individual level to practically confront their own inner conflicts and seemingly inherent contradictions? How has that worked for you, Brother Lucius?
I'm trying to think of the question that, you know, do you mean, how can we apply this and use it to an advantage in a way? Like,
yeah, in terms of practicality, how have you used this framework to not only reflect on as thought experiments, you know, based off of your research and your life experience, but how has this knowledge, which is super complex, yeah, it encompasses many different disciplines all in one. How has this been a practical application for you with respect to living your life and improving it?
Yeah, I think one thing that causes a lot of problems in many people's lives is doubts. And so to understand, and each doubt, in my opinion, is like a little spiral that's pulling you away from your perfect center. And so what is gravity? Ultimately, well, gravity is an aspect of mind, body, and spirit. Most people are just familiar with the physical gravity of our dimension, like bodies get attracted to each other. But a lot of people don't think about the gravity that exists within your mind and vibrational state or spirit state, what I like to call your light state harmony. And so based off of the doubts that you're actually holding is what you will be attracted to. And so you can, if I took a posture of everyone's bad and this and that, then, and I've even done like personal experiments with this. Like I'm going to hold this posture and see what comes into my life. Now I'm going to hold this posture and see what comes into my life. And as woo as it might sound, live in love. You know what I'm saying? Like do your best to just love life, and you will attract the things that make you happier. I think that's a really simple way to break it down.
I love
I
that
like that.
answer.
That is so synchronistic to our previous conversations, especially with Leslie.
Yeah, yeah.
If
Because
anybody's seen that conversation, I'd highly recommend going to watch it.
yeah, we talked a
But
lot about
super synchronistic.
mindfulness, you know, and how thoughts create things, and your beliefs and your
Mhm.
thoughts like literally create your reality. Jinx. Um and just how it's so important, especially like George said earlier, in times like now when there's such distress and chaos and crumbling happening all over the world, how important it is to like keep your own thoughts clean and positive, work from the heart space like
Fill
Lucius
your heart with
said.
love.
Right. Don't
Exuberate
operate
love.
from ego, you know, get the ego out of the way because we don't got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. So operate from your heart space and it will literally change your whole world. Your reality will shift so rapidly.
Well, I mean, just imagine if the politicians right now, instead of taking stances of fear based off of these conflicts, took
Right.
stances of confidence and love and
Yeah.
tolerance, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
We might be able to work together to have a solution. Like all people are pretty smart. For me, it's embarrassing as a human to see people fighting.
I
Right?
agree. It's
Exactly.
like, haven't we got past this shit yet? Right. Like, sorry.
There's so much trouble and strife in the world, you know, especially
Yeah.
everything going on with the Middle East. And
Yeah.
I was wondering, you know, I'd like to pose this to the group in terms of, you know, these historically cultural and societal factors that typically influence our belief from a young age, intergenerationally. But how do these cultural and societal factors influence our belief system and consequently our physical experiences?
I would say that they're 100% controlled by it, and that's what I was getting at earlier. Is we're born into these different cultures, these different thought processes, and we don't. Many people don't ever take that time to do that shadow work that we were somewhat speaking about earlier, where
Yeah.
you become aware of your subconscious pacings. And
Mhm.
the I like to call them delusions. It's the easiest way for me to describe it. Like to think that I am something. Like I was born in Cape Town, South Africa, but I moved to Oklahoma, moved to Florida. So what am I? Am I, how should I identify myself? Well, I'm
You
just human
are
on
You're a
Earth.
an
human
eternal,
on Earth.
infinite being having a
Yay.
temporary human experience. Yes. I
Right?
was waiting to use that.
There we go.
And so when people, imagine now if the whole world started to be able to remove how those types of identifiers, maybe they could get to that point where that's how they
Yeah.
identify, as what Ali was just saying. And
Yeah.
from there, I think the human race actually has a chance to grow because right now we're not really growing. We're somewhat like defeating ourselves, right?
So this leads me into a really good question that I want to hear everybody's thoughts on. Based on us being born with certain masks or labels or subconscious programmings or belief systems or whatever you want to call it, where do you think the NHI factor into this? Like if all of a sudden we had cosmic awareness that NHI are real, you know, it's not a question anymore that they exist and whatever. Like where do you think the awareness, the global awareness of that phenomenon being a realistic situation, how do you think that will change all of this? Like in my mind, I would like to think that we would drop all of these human dualistic polarity type of judgmental mindsets and hopefully embrace everybody else as like one race, so to speak. Like I
One
feel like
family.
I'm John Lennoning right now. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what do you guys think? Where do aliens fit into this?
George, you want to go ahead first? I'll head up second. It's a tough question.
Yeah, I'll reflect on that. Let's. I'm more curious about what you think, Lucius, and maybe I'll jump in.
Well, the way I've come to see it is, I mean, once we become aware of our pacing motions, we understand that we're basically creating these vortices for beings to exist within. And we're talking about right now. We're talking about the denser aspects of our creation. So the stuff like Jinn, Demon, Tulpa, and not all of them manifest to be like some crazy entity that flies around, but they'll shift your pacing in order to create a general pacing within humanity. And so I almost think that a lot of the governments, religions, and all that kind of stuff have stemmed from somewhat malevolent beings. And if we were to become aware of that we've been manipulated by them into thinking certain things so that they can become stronger, well, maybe we'll be more likely to remove those types of thought processes from our existence. At the same time, you have the super subconscious mind of it all. You have all the different layers. And eventually you get to a creator or a mind of it all, maybe God or something like that. And so when you find that flow, like the true you that exists without these delusions, we all get connected. And I think that's how we all connect, is either you could say through the mind of it all, or God, or a universal consciousness or flow, where we're not separated into these little clusters of thought processes.
Great answer.
Yeah.
And that makes me wonder, in terms of what you just said, with perception, are our perceptions of reality limited by people's natural tendency of avoidance, of confronting our inner shadow? And can facing these darker aspects of the human condition, the dark night of the soul, for instance, can this potentially expand our awareness, even if we can't reconcile fully these shadow aspects of ourselves?
I would think so, because the way I've come to see it is that every thought form that gets projected onto you adds to the delusion. It's layers, layers, and layers, and layers. And as you remove, I call them spirals of delusion, because they're thought forms that create pacing motions about your life. And so as you remove these thought forms that are creating these pacing motions, your line of sight changes. It goes from a very tiny spiral. For example, a drug addict has a 30-minute line of sight, right? Because they're thinking to their next fix. Now, if you're a college student, you might have a 4-year long line of sight. If you're connected to the universe, you might have like a line of sight of infinity. Like I studied astrophysics. So for me, it was what happened at the beginning of time. Where's the universe going?
Yeah.
So I had a bigger line of sight than a lot of other people in college. Just based off of that. And so I think when it comes to making choices, daily choices, you end up making choices that are longer term, the bigger your line of sight is. If you have a really small line of sight, you're going to make choices that will influence, like make you happy for the next 30 minutes as opposed to make you happy for a lifetime.
Now, when you talk about this kind of limited line of sight, and I'm generally referring to the the typically uninformed populace that aren't too hip on UAP, or maybe they're not into the lore or history. They go about their daily lives, doing their routine, concrete jungle rat race on that hamster wheel, and this term ontological shock. And I'd like to ask about the ontological shock aspect. Once disclosure is officially recognized by governing bodies, and they wheel out substantive proof or evidence for everybody to see. There's going to be a lot of people that have traditionally been locked into specific worldviews, particularly with religion. And I would imagine the mental gymnastics that they would do to try to balance the fact. You mentioned Galileo earlier in our pre-talk, and how he was kind of ostracized by the Catholic Church and made to read the Bible for, I guess, his punishment, right, or his reprogramming. Now, when it comes to ontological shock, Brother Looshes, is there a sort of fine line between existential dread in this regard, the dark night of the soul, and a healthy awareness of the impermanence of life in the universe, and what that could potentially mean with this new paradigm shift that maybe we're not alone? How would you address these two ends of the spectrum when it comes to people that are knowledgeable about the phenomena versus people that are generally uninformed?
That's where the biggest challenge is. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard Dave Rossi speak before, Dave Zed. And he has this line, it's, "You can walk a horse to water, but will it drink?" Right?
Yeah.
And so that reminds me a lot of the movie The Matrix, where you have some people that just they've already escaped the matrix, but they actually make deals with the people to get back into it, right? So I think that some people, and that's where I think everyone learns at their own rate. Artisan Tony even talks about like how he'll try to teach his kid something, but the kid only actually learns it after he experiences it and makes that choice for himself.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't force people to think a certain thing, and I think that's one of the greatest challenges. Because we're all individuals in that sense, and that almost leads back to your first question: is like the struggles to actually do the disclosure and everything. It's and how it might seem futile at points. Well, I think that the more people that talk about it, the more people will listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
Or it'll subconsciously become ingrained into their
little
life.
seeds, right? Just planting seeds.
I think that's all you can really do, and then maybe one day the horse will drink the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said.
Which I feel like that's the whole reason that we're doing this right now, that we are allowing people to have a space to express themselves without judgment, and just having the conversation is enough to broaden people's awareness,
I could agree to that. A question came to mind. Where do you guys, well, I guess I already kind of know, I already know your opinion, but anybody can answer. All right. The question is, where do you think disclosure is going? Because we had like a really big pickup, like we had like the Greer conference, and then we had the NASA thing, and then we had the UAP hearings, and we have Grush being a whistleblower, and there's all this talk of it being like right there. It's like right on the tip of our tongue, but it's like not happening officially yet. What do you guys think? Like, do you think this is going to happen? Do you think that this is like some kind of psyop? Do you think that this is just another distraction? What do you guys think of this whole disclosure process and where we're at and all that?
I think we've made good strides. Harvard now has the Galileo project out, and all these things add up. Like
Shout out Avi Loeb.
But you know what I'm saying? Like all these things add up to where they are little seeds, and each cluster of consciousness, like each little group of people, like scientists will listen to Avi Loeb, military people will listen to people like Grush.
Yeah.
And so everybody has,
which kind of goes back to the masks thing you were talking about earlier, about how people like gravitate towards the one they identify with and reject the ones that they don't.
Right. And so I think overall we're doing great in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the definition of disclosure?
That's
do
another
people want to know
question.
that we've recovered craft? Do they want to know that there's interdimensional beings? Like what does the government actually know? And I think that's also dangerous, though, to always be looking to what the government has to say about these types of things.
That's a good point,
Which also brings up the whole DSci aspect of the UAP Society.
Oh, go ahead, plug it.
Mm-hmm. The whole point of the UAP Society, in essence, is to get decentralized scientific data on UAP or the phenomena.
Right. So that it's not in the hands of people that can say, oh, don't look behind the curtain because nothing's back there.
Yeah.
And no, there's definitely something there too. And I've been working with so Jim Segala also helped launch that balloon out in Utah.
Right.
And I've been working with him recently.
What's he up
the last
to?
couple months. Sorry, say that again.
What's he up to?
Oh, well, he's developed the MooPass device.
Oh, tell me about that, because I saw that on your site, and I was like, what the heck is a MooPass?
Yeah.
It's basically a piece of technology that measures gravitational fluctuations, EM fluctuations, seismic data, acoustic data, and you can put it in your back pocket and walk around. And at the same time, he's got a server online, and so basically people will log in their daily journals on his server, and then he has the data separate. So it's a double-blind experiment. Like the experiencers don't have access to the data until a few months later.
Okay.
But the whole time he's like saying, well, there was a gravitational spike when this person thinks they got abducted. So he's got over 600 correlations scientifically related to user experiences and scientific data, right? So he has correlations with what the people actually experience, like a shadow being in the corner of their room or something of that nature. And then quite literally scientific data showing spikes in the magnetic field or spikes in a gravitational anomaly. And that was something that just came out pretty recently. I think Elizondo was talking about a sensor that you could detect UFOs with,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it ends up being the LIGO.
Yeah.
Well, not only the LIGO detects gravitational anomalies, but also accelerometers do that too. And that's what's in Jim's device is an accelerometer that measures the gravitational fluctuations, and those
Right.
relate directly to UAP experiences. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you know, you talk about this material technological device to help us collectively understand and scientifically measure the manifestations of certain phenomena, right? But I was wondering on a more biological sense, rather than augmenting our senses with an external piece of technology. You know, you're often fond of talking in your content about electromagnetism. And the question that I have for you with respect to electromagnetism is, you know, to what extent does electromagnetism influence our perception, and can we harness this knowledge of electromagnetism through some kind of innate ability or technique to better understand the phenomena?
yeah, I think that's exactly what Jim's working on. And I did the show with him, one of the Looshes Labs podcast episodes. And I asked him, I was like, so since you have, now that we know these gravitational anomalies are happening, these electromagnetic fluctuations are happening, can we actually make devices that recreate the effects that are going on and see now if we can communicate back to the phenomenon itself?
Mm.
But one thing to note is that it's really challenging. If this is truly an interdimensional phenomenon, then we need to understand that our technologies only exist within our dimension. So it's literally relative, like we were speaking about that superposition of relative vibrations, right?
Mhm.
And so any tool that we make is relative to our dimension. So it's going to be really challenging to see other dimensions and to work with other dimensions unless we actually create things like an interdimensional telescope.
Can it be done? Can the perception and understanding and discernment of these higher dimensions beyond our 3D plane, can it be done without technology? Like, you know, for instance, like the Hindus, they have thousands of years of meditative practice. The Buddhists, you know, with their meditative practice, you know, they've said that, hey, there are these different dimensions with these different types of beings, like going through the cycle of samsara, reincarnation, and depending on your state of mind at the time of death when we shed this physical form, it determines our next rebirth in whatever corresponding dimension our energies are propelled to. Are we able to interact or discern or even visit these higher dimensional planes without technology?
I
From
100% think that the human body is technology itself.
Ooh, love that.
So yes.
Bio machines.
But sorry, go ahead.
I said bio machines.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's how I've been taught to do it since I was 5. So I've been learning in my dreams from the age of 5. And half of that, I spoke about this a lot when we did that CE5 event together.
Yeah.
Was what I call the golden spot.
Right.
It's you existing without doubts, without delusions, and without all these different like projections that ultimately create distortions within that. You could say the quantum field or the longitudinal aspect of our EM vibrations. And what's the easiest way to put it? When you're perfectly centered and removed of the delusions, it's really easy to connect to those different dimensions, the less dense and the more dense, because you create what I like to call an interdimensional alignment. And that's all through conscious vibration. And that translates 100% into the ability to even have like lucid dreams and also the ability to carry information through death. Is that ability to be in line with the past and future selves. So what does technology do though? Like physical technology? Well, it's going to be a tool to help convince people that are very materialistic and scientific.
The
That
nuts
this is
and
even
bolts
possible.
folks.
Right, because not many people want to spend 15 years meditating on top of a mountain, right? They want answers now.
Right.
You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
If we were to create a tool to show that amidst a potential, now people might be more likely to spend years and years meditating.
Right.
But I do think that the human body itself does have the ability to interact. I mean, that ultimately goes back to shamans, right? Isn't that what a shaman does?
Uh-huh.
They're connected to the different dimensions.
Yep.
Right.
Through the use of certain plants or chemical compounds, right?
This whole
Yeah.
time we were talking about this, I'm like, okay, so we're talking about human bodies being biomachines. We're talking about technology that can allow us some sort of communication with these other dimensions, let's just say.
Mhm.
And then my question, or the thing that I was rolling around in my brain, was, okay, so what about plant medicine? Like,
Yeah.
what do you like? It's like a nature technology. It's like a hybrid or something, you know?
And Lucius in his content, he aren't you? You're a gardener, right? You often show videos of you planting. You've got a natural green thumb.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think gardening's awesome, but as far as connecting through the different dimensions and stuff, I see that as like using hallucinogenics or things like that. I see that as a tool. I don't think it's necessary at all.
Right.
The human body naturally produces DMT in its pineal gland.
Yep.
Mhm.
So I don't think that you need to use those tools in order to release it. I think you just need to get in that right state of mind.
Hmm.
I personally don't use them, although I do know many people that do, you know, and so I see it as a tool. I see them, yeah,
Okay.
Um,
Kind of like training wheels on a bike.
100%.
Well,
Yeah.
wait a minute. Was it Terrence McKenna that said something about, because like people were talking to him about mushrooms and having
Yeah.
all of these trips all the time, and he was like, I think they asked him like, at what point do you stop doing this, or how long do you continue doing this? And his response was basically like, well, it's kind of like a phone call. Once you get the message, you hang up. You know, once you use the plant medicine and you figure out what's going on and you make that connection, you don't have to keep doing it. You already got the point. So hang up the phone and do it on your own.
That's why I don't really.
Was that
meditate
Terrence
so much
McKenna? I hope
anymore.
I quoted that right.
Yeah, that was Terrence
It
McKenna.
was?
He also
Okay,
said,
good.
also said that the aliens are actually in the psilocybin mushrooms as well, but you know he's been known to take these heroic doses.
Mm.
ugh.
I think spores are like comparable to alien technology. Because can't they like survive through space travel and stuff?
Mhm.
Right? I don't know. Maybe I'm making stuff up now.
No, not only that, but they can also take over the minds of insects,
Yes.
right?
Oh, the
And have
zombie
that-
ants.
zombie ants. And so now when you think about spores or humans being infected with like a jinn or a tulpa or something of that nature, and you notice that it creates certain behaviors, you know, there's a relationship.
Mm.
Interesting.
I'm not saying it's a mushroom. I'm just saying there's a relationship
Yeah.
Right.
to having some type of parasite, right?
Okay.
Speaking of relationships, I wanted to ask you about scientific evidence. Is there scientific evidence to support the idea that collapsing the waveform is that somehow connected to the human subconscious or conscious mind? Is there scientific evidence for that?
Well, I'm sure you guys have all seen the freezing the water examples.
Yeah.
Dr.
Well,
Emoto.
That's where I don't know how. I haven't done that experiment myself. I think that would be a fun one just to do, right? I think anyone could do that in their home. I have a microscope. You know, I have bottles of water. I could just
Right.
type on.
Yeah.
I
We should
could
do
try it
that.
out and see if it works. I don't know though. I don't know for a fact if that is the case or not. You know,
Okay.
yeah.
That,
But the
we
way
should
I
do
see
that.
it is when
We
it
should do
comes
that.
to the pacing motions of our lives, that does start. For me, it's very obvious, but I haven't scientifically tested it. But the pacing motions of all our lives start with the collective subconscious of humanity, because I have a subconscious mind. My neighbors have subconscious minds. Every single person on this planet has a subconscious mind, and so you could say there's a collective awake humanity, but there's also a collective subconscious mind for humanity, and that the pacing motions of our physical dimension start with that subconscious.
In terms of the collective subconscious and collective conscious mind of humanity, with the prevalence of technology, the internet, this platform, you know, these programs that we use to connect with each other in real time, that transcends borders, distance, and time. Do you believe that the internet, for instance, you know, and there are various parts of the internet that are powered by algorithms and AI. Do you believe that the collective promulgation of what we as humans contribute to the internet that feeds these AI algorithms, do you believe that this is the next evolution of human consciousness, or could this perhaps be a form of NHI with the rise of the singularity, as Ray Kurzweil puts it?
I see it as almost a diverging moment for human evolution. I actually wrote so I have my original book here, and I wrote this section. It's called "A Shift in Natural Selection," and because I do, I do see how like we're being connected to, right? We're connecting with each other right now through the internet, but ultimately, I think if we were all more perfectly centered, like the shaman, like we were talking about earlier, we would be able to communicate consciously without technology. Without this physical technology, we can already have a telepathic communication with one another. And so it might be hard to see, but the more value we put on man-made creation, the less likely we'll ever develop our natural tools and senses.
Yeah.
So there, I see it as a shift, because when it comes to mate selection, most people are choosing their mates based off of like money, right? Status, something of
Physical
that nature,
appearance,
and maybe not
youth.
so much love and
Yeah.
the ability to care for children or something like that.
Right.
So I see
So
it as a distinct shift where you have some people are more natural in a way, and some people are more technological. But is becoming technological part of the natural process of a human? I don't know. So that might be just me thinking too much about it, and where naturally we do as humans create these technologies. So there's a lot to think about there.
yeah, there is. There's
Yeah.
a lot to unpack in that thought process. A
Yeah.
question that came to my mind is you meant what was your phrase for it? The golden spot? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What tips do you have for people that are wanting to get there? How did they get there? What tips do you have for just the regular Joe Schmo trying to start meditation for the first time? Because you've been deep in meditation since you were 5 years old. So for you, it's no sweat off your back. But some people are like, I can't sit still that long, and they start freaking out in like 2 seconds. So what advice do you have for people that want to get to that spot, or are brand new at meditation and don't know what to do, or say that they can't, or whatever?
Yeah, I think it's always about analyzing the pacing motions of your life. And so sit quiet, like literally, I know it might be challenging, but sit quiet for 5 seconds. Well, what's the next thing you do when you stop meditating? Say you would turn on your YouTube or something, or you turn on a video game. Why did you turn on your YouTube? Why did you turn on your video game? So that's where people themselves need to do that work, that internal work. It's almost impossible for someone else to sit there and analyze you, because again, the learning happens when you are ready for that learning, right? So I think it comes 100% to analyzing the pacing motions of your life.
I like that you said that, and I'm reminded of this recent video that you did about a day or so ago. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm quoting you miscorrectly from memory, but you stated something to the effect that your beliefs interact with the universe's vibrations to shape one's experiences. And you're often fond of saying that one should trust the universe to provide for your needs while letting go of worries.
The line I like to use, and it is kind of poetic, it's about my needs, they need not be, because as I walk my line, the universe will provide for me. The physical reality that we're experiencing is somewhat a construct that's created in your mind. And so ultimately it is just relative, like I'm a vortex of energy, the earth is a vortex of energy, but I've now used my senses to create the appearance of your bodies, right? So physical matter does exist, right? It's a relative vibration, but ultimately everything is just vibrations. And we, through our minds, create these constructs that we see. And so that's where it circles back to what we were talking about earlier about gravity of the mind. Because not only does gravity exist on body, like matter on matter interactions is what I would call body, but there's also gravity of the mind. And so when I have certain thought processes going on, it changes what I like to call manifestation potential. Because if I'm sitting quiet, everything's good, but now I have a thought, it creates a shift and will create a pacing motion. Say I want to get water. Well, now I need to get up and go get water. I've created a gravity towards the act of getting water and coming back. Translate that on the scale of living within doubt and living with love, like we were talking about earlier. And it all starts with the subconscious. And another way to think of it too is that you have the different realms of creation. Physical matter exists in the center, meaning the collective physical experience that ends up manifesting, but it all starts with that spiraling energy, starting with the delta wave, the theta wave, the alpha wave, and the beta, and then eventually collapses into our physical experience.
So to put it quite simply, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what comes to mind just, reflecting on what you just shared. Would it be fair to say that collapsing one's awareness states somehow creates our physical existence and how these physical forms manifest
Yeah, I
accordingly?
think it goes back to the whole idea, though, that we're all one and it is all one. And so a pacing motion within me will cause a pacing motion within someone else as well. So it's not like I am having a unique experience as in within my body, but we're all collectively sharing this field of this swimming pool of collective energy
Yeah.
that creates everyone's experiences. And so that's why I think it's really important. Like, yeah, you can achieve and accomplish anything you want. Trust me, you can. But it's important to consider the people that you're connected to, because that whenever you push this way, they're going to pull that way, right? So I think it's important to think about the collective whole when it comes to making those decisions about like what you're going to do with your life and things like that.
I like that. And the last question that I have for you, I want to honor everyone's time, but in terms of the collective contribution and say the double slit experiment, would it be fair to say that collapsing the waveform into this physicality, this manifestation of not only our bodies, but our 3D dimension, is it also the conglomeration of the collective power of our human species subconscious processes, or is it more so from an individual level?
I would say it's an overlapping of all of them. Yeah, I mean, individually we add to a collective. And that's why I do have an experiment, I call it collapsing the waveform, but I want to be out in the middle of the woods, no one around me within a 50-mile radius, and see if I can collapse different aspects of creation into existence. I mean, that's almost what's happening with CE5, is that you're allowing for beings to enter our dimension. And I think that relates a lot back to what Tom DeLonge says about like how the phenomenon reacts to when you react. For example, like there's a book on the table and it moves a little bit. If it freaks you out, that book's going to jump off the table because you've given it more energy. If you just kind of look at it and say, oh, that was weird, nothing might happen, right? So I see it as a collective process.
Yeah. I like that citation. I think that was from Steve-O's interview with Wild Ride. He mentioned something to that effect.
I keep wanting to plug Monsters of California just because it was a dope soft disclosure movie. If you haven't seen it yet, go see it.
Yeah, it was a good movie.
Well, they were feeding off fear, but then they realized love was more powerful or something.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool message.
Yeah.
I love that we keep coming back to like love as being the save all go all for this whole existence, right?
So Lucius.
Yeah.
So speaking of CE5, when are we going to get out and do another one together?
Oh, nice.
Whenever you guys are ready.
Okay.
I sold that property out in Brooksville.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So whenever you guys, want to get together and do something, I'm open.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome. Do you have any other questions?
No. I think I'm good. Forgive me. Normally I would want to talk like 10 more hours, but I'm looking at the clock and we have our CE5 on the server starting soon and we need to prepare for that. So but George, I know George is going to be there, but Alexei, if you want to join, it's every Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're already on the server, so just join.
Yeah. And so I have one last question, and I've been asking this question to everybody.
I was hoping you would ask.
Lucius, what is your greatest hope for the future of humanity?
Bam.
Well, I hope that we can actually travel the stars. My goal is to go to the moon. I'm ready to go to the moon. I see why we're not
take
on
me
the moon.
to the moon.
Gorillas with shotguns. So I think the important thing first is let's take care of our Earth. Let's get on the same page, and then we can grow as a species to become this intergalactic species. But we got to. It's like you need the proper foundation, right? Before you can grow. And I think right now we're working on that foundation.
Cool. Can't wait to see it come to fruition. Thank you so much, guys. This was cool.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you, Lucius. Thank you, George, as always. And thank you especially to this beautiful soul right here,
thank
AlliE.
you. I had a good time. This was cool.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And if
Right
you guys,
on.
again, I'm going to plug his website, luciuslabs.com. That's where you can get your copy of books like this. And by the way, I think it's cool that in the back you wrote, stay groovy.
Yeah. That was awesome.
That's how I like to sign them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So anybody that wants to get a book that Alexei wrote in that says "Stay Groovy," go to his website, luciuslabs.com.
Yep.
Awesome. You are a man of culture. It was an honor talking with you, and I hope we can do this again.
Yeah.
Yeah, part 2.
And go DSci, UAP Society in the house. All right,
All right,
cool. Thanks, guys.
Very
Appreciate
cool.
it. Namaste.
Namaste.
Aloha, brother.